Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I will be talking about all of the books I read in the month of June. June is officially over and it is now my birthday month. I am going to truly thrive in July, but before I can do that, I do need to send off to June and talk about all the books I read. So I read 9 books in June, which was very good for me. I feel like I haven't really been reading as much as I usually do in the last 3 or 4 months or so for very obvious reasons, but I feel like June was the most normal month for me. But I read a ton of queer stories, I read a ton of really good books, so let's get into them. The first 2 books that I read in June were for my June ARCs vlog, which is already up, and you guys can check it out if you want to see it. But the first one was The Dark Tide by Elisa Jasinska, and this is set on an island in which witches are kind of the rulers of this island. They have this magic, and every year there's this festival where the witches get to share a bit of their magic with the, common folk. And during this festival, the witch queen chooses a male sacrifice in order to prevent the ocean from flooding their island. And the chosen sacrifice for this year was our second main character's kind of childhood crush, if you will, and she then goes to the castle in order to sacrifice her own self in place of him. And it is a female-female romance between our witch queen and the new female sacrifice, and it was so atmospheric and beautifully written. If you are like me and like that very atmospheric, very lavender purpley prose, you like your stories to really paint a picture, paint a scene, I think this book is 100% for you. I loved every bit of the aesthetics and the atmosphere and the setting. It was so beautiful. The author spent a lot of time painting the picture of the scene, letting you know what the colors looked like, what the air felt like, what the smells were, all of those things. And I really love that, especially when we're talking about an ocean setting, because that's my favorite kind of setting. I also really connected with our witch queen character Eva. She is very much a pessimist. She is very confident in herself, very sure of herself, very independent. She doesn't really understand why people give so much of themselves to other people, and she doesn't understand why people need other people because she's just never been that girl, and I related to her so much. It's definitely like a grumpy sunshine trope with our 2 main characters. I will say that the transition of their relationship and kind of the development of their relationship isn't super defined. Like, they're not enemies to lovers, I don't want to go that far, but there is kind of this animosity between them, and the animosity towards actual feelings is not entirely clear, but their chemistry I felt was so on point, and once they finally kissed, it was just very satisfying to me, and I was squealing, as you can see in the vlog, and I just really loved the story a lot. Again, one of those slower atmospheric fantasies that not everybody is going to like, but if you know that you are a fan of that, this is going to deliver you some beautiful sapphic fantasy goodness. Now, the next book was, again, also in that vlog, and it was a bit of a dud for me, and that was Court of Miracles by Kester Grant. This was pitched as Jungle Book meets Les Mis. We are basically following France after a failed revolution, and there is this underground makeup of all of these different courts. So you have the Court of Thieves, and you have Court of Courtesans, you have the Court of Assassins, etc., etc. And we are following a girl who is the daughter of one of the elite members of the Court of Thieves, and she goes on kind of a quest in order to try to save her sister who was sold to another court. I forget what court that one was, but it was the bad court. court. And so she's kind of going on this journey, and she also finds like another sister along the way, so it kind of has a bit of a found family thing going on. My overall thoughts on this book was just that it had a lot of wasted potential. I really loved the concept of all of these different courts. I really did like the incorporation of kind of the Jungle Book aspects to it, because each of the courts have a very like animalistic theme to them. Like the Court of Thieves are centered around cats, and then the bad court, which I still don't remember what theirs was designated to, he was the tiger, so you got kind of those themes going on. I really did like the premise of this book. It's just the execution was not there for me, and I admittedly say that I also may not have liked this book as much because I'm not familiar with Les Mis. I think I saw the non-musical movie in high school, but like I'm not really familiar with the story, so a lot of maybe the references could have been lost to me, very possible, but I also was not a fan of the writing style. I thought the plot was just really messy. I thought the structure was very messy. It was just a poorly executed book, in my opinion, and so I couldn't really get into it in any aspect, even if I missed kind of the references that it was referring to. This one was a bit of a dud. I think I gave this like a 2-star, but it's probably more of like a 1.5, so it's a shame, but not all of them can be 5 stars. Again, if you want to hear more of my in-depth thoughts about those 2 books and 2 other arcs that came out recently, then definitely go check out that video. The next book I have to talk about is one that I can't talk about too much because it is coming in an upcoming vlog that is hopefully going to be up this week if I can get my ass into gear and read the last book, but that is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I finally freaking read The Poppy War, and it was absolutely incredible. Who is surprised? Are you surprised? I am not surprised. I was not surprised, and I am so glad that I was not surprised because this was absolutely immaculate. We are following our main character Rin, and at the first kind of quarter/half of the book, she is training at this military camp that she studied really hard to get into. It's like the prestigious of the prestigious schools. Only the top of the top get to go there, and so she kind of worked her ass off in order to escape her abusive home and her small little town in order to get into this school and hopefully just do better for herself. And that is kind of the focus of the first half. She gets to this military school. It's very, school setting things, learning things, and discovering things. You got a really quirky, wise wizard who's high as fuck all the time. My favorite trope, personally. If you have any recommendations, would like to know. And then the second half is when shit hits the fan and war has ensued and she is now an official soldier and not just in the classroom. So this was just the betrayal that I felt when I read this book and realized how deeply ingrained the gods were in not only this magic system, but this entire lore, this entire world makeup. I was appalled and betrayed, yet again, by the book community for not telling me that that was such a huge part of this book. This literally deals with using opium as a psychedelic drug, hallucinogenic drug, in order to commune with the gods of their pantheon. And all y'all had to say was that this book was triggering and dealt with dark themes? That's all you had to say? And then compare it to Harry Potter? I'm done. I'm done. Anyways, all jokes aside, yes, this book does deal with shamanism and using opium as a tool for shamanism. It deals with, of course, war in a very realistic and traumatic way. Chapter 22, it was as triggering as a lot of people have warned me. Overall, this was absolutely incredible, and you guys are going to see all of my reactions to it in the upcoming vlog. While I'm here, I'll talk about the other book that I finished in June for that vlog, which was Empire of Sand by Tasha Shuri. This is following our main character, who is a part of this kind of barbarian clan. Her mother was a part of these barbarian peoples in which her city believes are inferior because they have very, primitive beliefs, and they live in the desert, and they kind of commune with these divas and things like that. They just, stereotypical, they're primitive, they don't have buildings, so they're lesser kind of ideology. And she was taken in by her father, who is the governor of this country, so he does hold a lot of power, and so she was kind of sheltered. She was raised civilized and things like that, and some events occur where she is forced into an arranged marriage, and things evolve from there, where she is kind of becoming a tool for the religious power of this country. This one I was just not super invested in. I don't necessarily have really a lot of negatives, at least not that I can really remember, but I also don't really have a lot of positives about it. It was just very lukewarm to me, and I think it was mainly because this is heavily character driven, and it does have a center around the romance. And listen, I'm all for a fantasy romance, sign me up, but I couldn't really get invested in any of the characters. So with a book, again, this is why I don't really care for character-driven books. Like, it takes a very, very skilled writer to make me love a character so much that it makes me forget that nothing is happening, or nothing substantial is happening for my own entertainment. And that's kind of just the case that happened right here. I would still recommend it if you're interested, especially in Indian history and folklore, because it deals with, like, I think it pulls history from the Mughal Empire, if I'm not mistaken. So I would still recommend it. Give it a chance. You may like it more than me, but me personally, it just didn't hit the spot. The next 3 books I'm going to talk about are all for the vlog that I did with Brody, and you guys can check out that video. Brody and I did a little collab where we read 3 of each other's favorite books, and the first book that I read was Wilder Girls by Rory Power. This is kind of Brody's brand, so I had to pick it up, and I can safely say that I would have never ever ever in my life picked this up if it weren't for Brody, because this deals with a lot of tropes and genres that I don't really care for. I am not a fan of an apocalyptic setting. I'm not a fan of kind of a dystopian setting. I hate the themes of taking things that are mundane in everyday society, like finding food, water, supplies, things like that, and making it the sole purpose of a novel. And that kind of seemed like the center of this, paired with like government conspiracies. It was very predictable, and I didn't really care for. I have no emotions about this book whatsoever. I know it was a very divisive book. I know that a lot of people have very strong feelings about it. I will say that y'all were super dramatic about the ending. Like, I went into this book thinking the book ended mid-sentence by the way some people were talking about the ending of this book and how like abrupt it was. I thought it was just like a open-ended story, but it was still like a good conclusion in my opinion, but obviously that's a controversial topic. But yeah, other than that, I just don't have any feelings about this book whatsoever. I kind of wish I had more thoughts so I could give you guys more of those thoughts, but it wasn't the story for me. And it didn't give me any feelings at all, or any opinions, which if you are a watcher of my channel know that it is very, very rare for that to happen. The next book I read was Trail of Lightning by Rebecca Rowanhorse, and oh my gosh, I really, really, really enjoyed this book during the first half. This is following our main character Maggie, and she is a monster hunter during this apocalyptic setting in the world, in the United States in particular, where a huge flood overtook most of the world, and so it's a little different nowadays, and she is kind of contained in this, I assume, like Native American designated reservation area, and the kind of magic of this world is dependent on your family clans, and so one of her clans gives her super speed, and then another one of her clans gives her this bloodlust and makes her a really great killer, and so she is using these abilities paired with a family friend's son or grandson in order to try to kill this witch who is creating monsters. And I really, really loved the first half of this book. I loved Maggie as a character. She is just one of those deeply traumatized characters where she hates herself and she's just really hard on herself and has gone through a ton of shit, and it is just so sad to read about. But she's just one of those grumpy, hard-headed characters that I just love. She's a bad bitch. I support her in all of her endeavors. But what really ruined this book for me was the men. I don't know how else to put it. Like, all of the men in this book were trash, except for her really close, almost father figure, who is the father or grandfather of the partner in which she's on this quest with. And I was also just not a fan of how the plot was structured. As you can probably tell, I have discovered that I am a plot-driven reader. I don't know why it took me so long to discover that, or maybe it's just a lot of the books that I'm reading, but I am 100% a plot-driven reader. And so a lot of books have just been really annoying me with kind of the weird structure of the plots that they have been taking. And this one, it's just the plot was very scatterbrained in my opinion, and I didn't like how it was tied up. I didn't like how all of the men were influencing Maggie and her character development that she could have done on her own. I had just a different vision of where this book was going to go, and it did not go in that vision, and apparently I'm stubborn and think I am correct in all avenues. So if it doesn't go my way, I don't like it. It is what it is. But I am curious if anybody watching has read the sequel and if they think I might like it more. I would love if you could go in my Instagram DMs and we could chat about it, and I could go more in depth about what my issues were and if those issues continue. But if it doesn't, maybe I'll pick up the sequel. I do like the world. I do like the incorporation of Navajo folklore, and I do like Maggie. So there is still hope for me to continue with this series, but this one was a bit of a letdown because of how much I was enjoying it. And then finally, I read Queen of the Conquered by Case and Calendar, and this is following our main character, Signori. I still do not know how to pronounce her name, which is fault on me 100%. I should probably look up pronunciations, but alas, I am a terrible booktuber and a terrible reviewer. But this is following Signori, and she is in a very, very unique position. So this book takes place in the Caribbean, and it is placed in the Caribbean where Nordic inspired people have colonized and thus rules this set of islands. And our main character is the descendant of a slave who bought his freedom and made a deal with a white slave owner and white master in order to kind of help him with the land. And so he has his own house, he has his own kind of titles, he is free, and so she is the descendant of that man and that freed slave. And because of kind of the social maneuverings, and after the murder of her family, she becomes the head of the white master who granted that slave freedom. So she is now a black woman who is running this estate and running this designated part of the island. And she has to go to the head island, like head estate, castle. It's not a castle, but kind of like the head honcho's island with all of the other owners, all of the other masters, and she goes there in the hopes to murder all of them. So it is a very deeply intricate political story, and there is a fantastical element to it because our main character has the ability to read minds, and that ability was used in such a cool way because that is how we got into the minds of all of the characters that we meet, and that's how we get all of the backstories on all of the people because she can kind of sense their memories and things. This book was just really, really, really cool. But it was also really, really, really boring. It was very, very slow. And I can deal with a slow book. I actually quite like slow reads, but it was the fact that all of the political machinations, all of the turning points, like if somebody died, if somebody was killed, all of the major plot points were done off page, and that's where it really fell flat to me, because I would be reading all of this buildup and all of this buildup, and then something massive would happen, and then it would just be somebody telling Signori that it happened. So that was really, really disappointing for me, because I did really like the character studies that were in here. I liked the complexities of it. I liked that nobody was good or bad. I liked that everybody was extremely morally gray. I loved the discussions of power, privilege, colonization, all of these things. I just feel like it would have been better suited like as a TV show, as a movie. I think it would be a really cool TV show, honestly. But as a book, it just was not the right medium for me to ingest this story, I feel like. Maybe if I had the audiobook, I would have enjoyed it a bit more because it would have helped me with the slow bits. But alas, I did not, and I had to read this physically, and it was a bit of a trug to get through. The next book I read was Girl, Serpent, Thorn by Melissa Bashardoust. This is following our main character, Soraya, and she has been cursed with a poisonous touch since birth, which she has been told was cursed upon her due to her mother's dealing with a diva. And in this book, divas are creatures of destruction. They are very mischievous, chaotic beings, and so she was cursed with this poisonous touch. And because of this, she has lived a life of seclusion. She has lived a life of solitary and has forced to kind of just live in this castle palace while the rest of her family kind of lives her life. And she is actually the twin sister of the Shah. And upon journey back to their main palace, the Shah was attacked by a diva, and thus they captured the diva, brought it back, and it is now imprisoned. And so Soraya is going to then take this opportunity to try to learn more about her curse through this imprisoned diva. Now, this book has been pitched as monster girlfriends falling in love, and I'm gonna have to stop that pitch right there, because I do think that a lot of people are going to have issues with this book once they read it, because they are going to have very unrealistic, or not even unrealistic, but just different expectations for what this book is going to be, because it has been very heavily pushed that it has a female-female romance in it. And although the sapphic relationship is endgame in the story, it is much more properly described as a bisexual main character who just ends up with a woman, because actually a majority of this book is kind of Soraya dealing with a relationship, not even a relationship, but just being in the presence of a male figure. It is very much a bisexual main character, and you get relationships with predominantly a male character, but you also do get that moments with the female diva. And so I do think a lot of people are going to be disappointed with that. I personally, as a bisexual reader, and I will also say, I don't know if she's bisexual. It's not on the page. I probably shouldn't make assumptions. Bisexual, pansexual, regardless, she is attracted to multiple genders. And as a bisexual reader, I really, really loved seeing this, because I can't recall, and I'm sure maybe I have read it, I just can't remember, but I can't recall off the top of my head reading a bisexual character who on page has multiple partners who have different gender identities at a substantial part of the book. I feel like this is the first book that I have read that where a bisexual, pansexual main character does spend a lot of time with different genders in a, I don't even want to say romantic way, but kind of romantic way. You'll understand once you read it. It's a little messier than that, but I really did appreciate that. I loved that. And I also loved Soraya as a character. She goes through so much character development, and I do think that this book deals with so much about her, and it really is a journey with her. Everybody else is kind of just in the background, and I really loved that. I think this is a book where a character-centered story really did work for me. She made me invested in her story immediately. I was already really in love with her, and I wanted to fight everybody who did her dirty, and I really loved her. I really loved her journey with this. I loved the incorporation of Persian mythology, and I really loved the story. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It was really fantastic. I do think a lot of people, again, are going to be a bit disappointed with this because they're probably going to go into this expecting something else. I really loved it. I still recommend it if you guys want to pick it up. It is coming out in like a few days. I think it comes out on July 7th, so snag it. It's a pretty good one. Speaking of pretty good ones, my last book that I read in June was Felix Ever After by Casey Calendar. Wow, was this book absolutely incredible. This was the Cover Whores book pick for June, and the live show is also on my channel, so definitely go check it out. This is following our main character Felix, and he is a trans boy who is also kind of dealing with the rest of his identity throughout this book, but he does use he, him pronouns, and he has been not even blackmailed, but he has been exposed for his past and dead named at his school. Somebody put a gallery up with his pictures and his dead name, and so he is going to try to get revenge on the person that he believes did this, and by doing that he is going to then also not necessarily catfish them, but just not tell them his identity in order to try to get information and try to get that person to open up and thus give him secrets so he can too exploit them. And this also deals with Felix wanting to fall in love because he has never fallen in love and he really wants to experience those emotions. This book deals with so much. It deals with first love, it deals with identity, it deals with sexuality, it deals with transphobia, it deals with high school futures and like goals and college and all of those things. It deals with expression, it deals with family dynamics, it deals with so much. And normally I feel like a lot of books cannot juggle all of those themes in one story, but Kaysen did it beautifully. I will say that I do wish it was 50 pages longer, maybe even 100 pages longer. I think it could have warranted that much length because of how much this story deals with, and I do think the ending was a bit rushed, but other than that, I really loved this. I loved how messy this story was and seemingly unrealistic, and yet this was probably one of the most realistic stories I have read about a queer teenager, and I just appreciated this so much. It really had my chest tight the last half of the book. It was such an emotional read, such a powerful read. I really just loved it so much, and I could not warrant giving it any less than 5 stars. Please pick this book up. Every person can get something out of this story. I firmly believe that. It's so good. And again, if you have read it, definitely go check out our live show because I do think we go over more in depth about each of the individual themes in it. But yeah, this was fantastic. I really loved it, and I cannot wait to get a finished copy on my shelves. Alright, so that is it for this video. If you are interested in purchasing any of these books for yourself, I will have all of the affiliate links down below. It doesn't cost you anything extra, it just helps me out in this channel. I will also have all of my links to my socials, my wish list, my address if you want to send me any books for review. All of those things will be at your convenience. I will also have links to some petitions for you to sign because the movement is not over, and I really hope you guys enjoyed your month of reading. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Bye!